get it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Is it fine?
Monsieur Jacobs.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, good afternoon, and thank you very much for making time to come and attend the press conference to be hosted by Parliament's presiding officers. We especially thank you for making time on a Sunday to respond to the invitation to come to the press conference. We really appreciate it. We also apologize for the little bit of confusion at the beginning. We had to change our venues multiple times because we have got different broadcasters who are interested in streaming and taking the press conference live. And we had to make sure that we utilize a venue with systems that are compatible with theirs so that we can maximize access by all South Africans who would like to follow the address by the presiding officers at this press conference. So we also thank you for your understanding and accommodation in this regard. The presiding officers are here with us. I will just introduce them very quickly, and without any waste of time, I will hand over to them to give us their address. We've got the Speaker of the National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, seated at the middle at the table. And next to the Speaker is the Chairperson of the NCOP, Thandi Modise, seated to the right of the Speaker. And on the left-hand side of the Speaker is the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. Gengezi Mgidlana. Without any further ado, I will invite the Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Baleka Mbete, to address us. Over to you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Luzuko. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Today I'll read the statement. The Constitutional Court delivered a unanimous judgment in the matter relating to compliance with remedial action set out in a report of the Public Protector. I have taken the time to study the judgment, and this statement represents my preliminary observations. The judgment makes sound, balanced, and critical findings. In an important way, these are major and most important lessons that will serve to guide our processes and approach in handling reports of Chapter 9 institutions in the future. There is now legal certainty on this matter. One thing is certain: our democracy is alive and well. With the benefit of the judgment, certain matters could have been handled differently. We will use this judgment to guide the relevant processes in future. The Constitution is the foundation of our society. The Constitutional Court, on the other hand, is guardian of our Constitution. We appreciate the clarity provided by the Court on all the matters which it dealt with. Indeed, the Constitutional Court has affirmed the National Assembly's powers and oversight responsibilities. To illustrate this point, I wish to quote the following aspects of the judgment. Open quotes. In principle, there is nothing wrong with wondering whether any unpleasant finding or outcome is correct and deploying all the resources at one's command to test its correctness. The National Assembly was indeed entitled to seek to satisfy itself about the correctness of the Public Protector's findings and remedial action before it could hold the President accountable in terms of its sections 42.3 and 55.2 obligations. These sections impose responsibilities so important that the National Assembly would be failing in its duty if it were to blindly or unquestioningly implement every important report that comes its way from any institution. Both sections 42.3 and 55.2 do not define the strictures within which the National Assembly is to operate in its endeavor to fulfill its obligations. It has been given the leeway to determine how best to carry out its constitutional mandate. Additionally, Section 1821B, read with Section 82B3, does not state how exactly the National Assembly is to attend urgently to or intervene in relation to the Public Protector's report, close quotes. Again, open quotes, it would be incorrect to suggest that a mere investigation by the National Assembly into the findings of the Public Protector is impermissible on the basis that it trumps the findings of the Public Protector. Rhetorically, on what would they then base their decision to challenge the report? Certainly not an ill-considered viewpoint or a knee-jerk reaction, close quotes. All this quotation comes directly from the judgment of the Constitutional Court. I move to the next bullet point. In commenting on the doctrine of separation of powers and clarifying the nature of its order, the Constitutional Court had this to say, and I further quote, "It falls outside the parameters of judicial authority to prescribe to the National Assembly how to scrutinize executive action, what mechanisms to establish, and which mandate to give them for the purpose of holding the executive accountable and fulfilling its oversight role of the executive or organs of state in general. The mechanics of how to go about fulfilling these constitutional obligations is a discretionary matter best left to the National Assembly. Declaring law or conduct inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid is plainly an obligatory power vested in this court, as borne out by the word must. Unlike the discretionary power to make a declaratory order in terms of Section 38 of the Constitution, this court has no choice but to make a declaratory order where Section 172(1)(a) applies. Section 172(1)(a) impels this court to pronounce on the inconsistency and invalidity of, in this case, the President's conduct and that of the National Assembly. This we do routinely whenever any law or conduct is held to be inconsistent with the Constitution. It is not reserved for special cases of constitutional invalidity." Close quotes. So I've finished quoting the judgment. Indeed, in the law reports, there are cases where either a decision of the President or executive and Parliament has been found to have been inconsistent with the law, including the Constitution. We think that this affirmation of the powers and functions of the National Assembly and the clarification provided on the role of the Constitutional Court in terms of Section 172 bodes well and is important for democracy and should not be missed in the discourse around this matter. I come to areas needing consideration. As we all know, the judgment has also been critical of actions of the National Assembly. The court found that it was not correct for the National Assembly to pass a resolution that purported effectively to nullify the findings made and remedial action taken by the public protector and replacing them with its own findings and remedial action. It stated on a proper construction of its constitutional obligations, the National Assembly was duty-bound to hold the President accountable by facilitating and ensuring compliance with the decision of the public protector. Therefore, the Constitutional Court found that the resolution passed by the National Assembly absolving the President from compliance with the remedial action taken by the public protector in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution was inconsistent with Sections 42, 3, 55, 2, and B, and 1813 of the Constitution was invalid and was set aside. I now come to our conclusion. I must reiterate that the Constitution is the foundation of our society. The Constitutional Court is guardian of our Constitution. Secondly, it has affirmed the powers of the National Assembly. Thirdly, as stated before, the National Assembly and broadly Parliament respects the judgment. The judgment does provide guidance in terms of how the reports of the Public Protector and generally Chapter 9 institutions should be dealt with. This guidance is appreciated. All parties collectively must reflect on this judgment, and we must see how it can strengthen the performance of our constitutional mandate. I will be asking leaders of parties in Parliament for a meeting on this matter. There has already been a request for a debate on the implications of this judgment for the National Assembly. There is also a proposal from one of the parties for a multi-party committee to look into the matter. And lastly, as we know, as I received a motion on the removal of the president from the DA, I have duly acceded to it, and the debate on that motion has been scheduled for Tuesday afternoon, which I believe honorable members of the media are already aware of. Thank you for your attention. That is the end of my statement.
Speaker, thank you very much for the address. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that the address by Speaker will be made available to you shortly and will be emailed to all media. We'll then take a round or two of questions. As per tradition, I request that you identify yourself, the media house that you represent, and ask your question. If you can please ask one question at a time, we probably will be able to accommodate other questions in another round if you have got multiple questions. So can we take 5 hands? So Wyndham, Marianne, Sebonga, Gail, and okay, Familia 24. We've got those in that order. Can we follow that order, please? Wyndham, you want to start?
Wyndham Hartley from Business Day. Madam Speaker, will you recuse yourself from presiding on Tuesday afternoon if asked to do so by the opposition?
Good afternoon, Marion Merton, Daily Maverick. You extensively quoted from the Constitutional Court judgment. The Constitutional Court judgment also said that Parliament stepped into the shoes of the Public Protector to replace the Public Protector's binding remedial actions with its own, and that step, that action was effectively tantamount to taking the law into its own hand, and therefore Parliament acted in a manner inconsistent with the Constitution. Your comments on that, please, and are we expecting something to happen in the National Assembly, maybe a statement from yourself, maybe a statement or a motion tabled in another manner, to effectively withdraw the motion which absolved the President of any liability to repay? How is that going to be handled now that the Constitutional Court has said that that motion was unconstitutional and unlawful? Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Siyabonga Mkhwanazi from Independent.
I just want to know, in the light of the Concourt's finding, will you consider to resign as the Speaker and as Chairperson of the NCOP? And also, will you apologize to the Public Protector? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's the first round. We will now afford the presiding officers an opportunity to respond to the questions raised.
Thank you very much. I'll address the question that asked about how did Parliament deal with this matter. You would recall that the first instance that Parliament dealt with the issue was in the fourth Parliament. And that particular process led to a committee being established, which then did not finish its work. The fifth Parliament then established another ad hoc committee. At that time, the fifth Parliament, when it established the ad hoc committee determined its own rules as per its own mandate that it was given. And that mandate really pertained to looking at the report and dealing with it as per the terms of reference in that regard. You would recall that parallel to that, there was a subsequent decision that was taken in the Western Cape High Court that related to providing, at the time, a particular view on how the reports of the public protector would be handled, which, to be more precise, the Western Cape High Court at the time indicated that the reports of the public protector at the time were recommendations. Then we traversed the process as we were dealing with the matter of the ad hoc committee, and we had a subsequent decision of the Bloemfontein, Supreme Court of Appeal, which then overturned the decision of the Western Cape High Court, basically indicating what the Constitutional Court has now confirmed, that the reports of the public protector are not open to, as it were, being replaced, that is your remedial action being replaced in that regard. Now, the important issue to look at on those key points that I'm mentioning is that as Parliament, we were acting based on the decisions that were taken at the time by the various courts, which then guided us accordingly. From the Western Cape High Court, which gave a particular directive on how the reports of the public protector should be dealt with, to then the one of the Supreme Court of Appeal. The important issue about the Supreme Court of Appeal, you would know that the process of Parliament terminated just before the decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal, which then gave further clarity in that regard. So in that period and at that time, what we were guided with, what we were guided by was the decision that obtained and that existed of the Western Cape High Court. So that clarifies, I think, how Parliament has dealt with the issues which came to the point where it is. And of course, taking matters to a constitutional court, as the court has indicated, provides all arms of the state and provides all those involved with an opportunity to get clarity and guidance on how those matters should be dealt with. And that clarity and guidance has been provided by the court, and as the Speaker has indicated, that Parliament, meaning the Speaker and the Chairperson, welcome the judgment and the clarity provided.
Thank you. There's a question that, let me start off with Siyabonga Mkhwanazi's question. The sanctioning of the people found to have been involved, as he says, in subverting the findings of the public protector. One of the findings says that the president must deal with that matter. Parliament is in no way empowered to sanction ministers. It can make recommendations on sanctions or censure, but the president is the only person who has the powers to deal with members of cabinet. So we are hoping that he, alongside with having publicly said that he accepts that he will deal with that matter. You've also asked us how we got here, and that Parliament has flouted the Constitution. Has Parliament flouted the Constitution? The court found that there was nothing wrong with the processing of the issues raised, or rather the whole report of the public protector. What the court ended up finding was that instead of Parliament, after processing that report, it found that instead of then deciding that our own findings as Parliament were going to replace those of the public protector, we should first have taken the matter to court. And that is why we are found to have flouted. Not that we had no right as Parliament to deal with the public protector's report the way we dealt with, or any other report for that matter. So the lesson we have learned there is, in future, deliberate, take the matter for reconsideration to court. And that is what has been flouted. That is what the flouting, I suppose, refers to. What if, you also said, if Tuesday fails, what happens? Where does this leave Parliament? On Tuesday, the DA motion of impeachment will be entertained by the National Assembly. We can't predict what will happen. But supposing what has happened in the past happens on Tuesday, we cannot therefore say, because the majority of the members have voted or have said this way, therefore, because the Constitutional Court said you should not have replaced the findings, therefore we must crash. We must wait until we see how the National Assembly will deliberate on the matters and deal with them on Tuesday. On the last question, you are saying, does the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the NCOP consider resigning? The Speaker will respond for herself. I certainly will not consider resigning. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think if I may start with that last question that the Chairperson has responded to, may I also publicly say that I am not, nor do I believe there will be a reason shortly to decide to resign. So I'm not considering resigning. I also am not considering doing anything in terms of the functioning of the National Assembly that is out of the ordinary. I normally preside, we rotate the presiding with other presiding officers. We have responded positively to a request for debating the motion to remove the president. We have allowed that. It has been scheduled. We are going to debate. As I said, there are requests from different parties for meetings of leaders or of parties to discuss the meaning of the judgment, whereupon we expect that collectively, as political parties charged with the responsibility to come to Parliament and represent the views and aspirations of our people, we will exchange views, we will take matters forward based on the outcome of those engagements, which we believe will be the responsible way to deal with matters. I think the question by Gay of how did it come to this has been answered, in fact, by both the Secretary who gave the background. just factually, so people know how, in fact, things arrived at where we are right now. Ethics committee. At this point, the issue or the possibility of an ethics committee process has not arisen. However, in the engagements of the next few days, obviously we've got to be open-minded about whether and if we get to that point. I think we've exhausted the questions that we raised. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, I think so too, presiding officers. Then the next round, shall we start with the new hands? Paul Vecchiato, Lester Kivitz, Kalata at the back. You want to do a follow-up?
Sorry, it's Gag. I just would like the question answered in terms of the public's perception of Parliament and what the risks are to Parliament in terms of the way this process unfolds. In the eyes of the public, where Parliament will be left. I mean, what are your views in terms of those dangers, that you end up where you have MPs voting a particular way, but that sends a message to ordinary citizens?
Combine this follow-up question with the 4 questions, the hands that I've noted. I've noted Paul Vecchiato, Lester Kivitz, Lukhanyi Kalata, and yes, you. Can you just add to the follow-up questions? Paul, you want to start?
Good day, Chairperson, Chair and Speaker. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. I just want to get this clear. The Concord judgment has made a very, very serious ruling, and that is the Parliament and the members of Parliament did not, well, they broke their oaths of office. That's essentially what it comes to. Whether they did it intentionally or through negligence is not the issue. The fact is it happened. What are you going to do that? Because now if we have a National Assembly and NCOP full of MPs who do not understand the gravity of their oaths of office, what is the point of having them there? Thank you.
Thank you, Lester from the NCA. In these committees, in the ad hoc committees, there are law advisors, there are content advisors. What is this entire process saying with the Concord ruling saying that, and with some of the excuses that have been given that there was insufficient or incorrect legal advice? What does this say about the support that Parliament is given with all those advisors and legal advisors that sit in on these committees? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lukhanyi Kalata from the SABC. My question is primarily directed to the Speaker. Ma'am, I just want to know, in your opinion, if you think that it is an indictment on yourself, an indictment on ANC members that are in the National Assembly, as well as an indictment on the President himself, that we're sitting today in a democratic South Africa where the Constitutional Court rules that essentially the ANC and the ANC members within the National Assembly and the ANC president, they violated the Constitution. Do you find it to be, is it okay with you, or is it something that is it something that irks you when you sit at home, or maybe just before you go to bed and you think about it? Just what's your opinion on where we are as the ANC today? Thanks very much.
Good day, thank you. It's Jenna Etheridge from News 24. This question directed to the Speaker. I would just like to know whether Mbese, in her capacity as the Speaker and ANC Chair, will support a free vote for ANC MPs on Tuesday. Also, given that the Constitutional Court has reaffirmed the importance of the Public Protector as a Chapter 9 institution, will the National Assembly act on her plea for a bigger budget so that she can do her job properly, given all the work that her office faces from the Gogo Dlaminis of the world, as she puts it? Thank you.
Presiding officers, before you respond, Field ISOP also feels that her question was not fully answered. Which part of your question, Phil, that you feel?
So the second part of my question on the apology to the public protector, whether you will consider doing that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. The presiding officers and the Secretary to Parliament will respond to the penultimate round of questions.
Thank you. I don't know how to start, but clearly the members of the media are not catching on that the functions of the National Assembly and the NCOP are not the same. And therefore, you cannot aggregate the findings, decide that because the Concord says the National Assembly, your processes were right, but you shouldn't have done this particular thing. Therefore, we get a question that says, what's the point of having members of the NCOP and the National Assembly if they all have been found to have flouted the Constitution? And I want to respectfully say it does present a challenge, because when journalists misinterpret and then put out their stories out there, it does mislead and also miseducate the public. The National Council of Provinces has not dealt with this issue at all, has not been mentioned in the court papers at all. The Concord's findings are confined to the National Assembly because they deliberate on the public protector's reports, not the National Council of Provinces. Now, it's important for us to start there and say, does Parliament need to do something about this? Because over and over, either there is a conflation of the two houses, or members of the media cannot make a distinction between the functions and the roles played by the two houses. And they are very separate. They often do things that are similar, but their mandates, as per the Constitution that has brought us here today, very, very different. So, no, to come back to that question, whether we would resign, we would not resign because we have not been found. But also, has the part of that question was that Parliament has also been cited to have violated the oath of office. No. Concord found and made that finding on the President, not on Parliament. I stand corrected, but Parliament has not been accused that way. But if one wants to take it further, there is a process which brings members of Parliament to Parliament. There is also a process outlined in the Constitution which deals with how an individual MP must behave, what qualifies you to continue to be an MP, and what disqualifies you to continue to be an MP. And therefore, Parliament will follow that. There is also a question that says, the support. Why is it that people are saying they received advice and was advice adequate, especially the legal advice? The advice to the committee, to the ad hoc committee, yes, they had access to legal advice. But as I said earlier on, Speaker, there was an area which was really grey. The fact that your first court, Cape Town, says, no, the findings of the public protector are recommendations. And you start a process, because it is the court says these are recommendations, you start a process which then gets into these findings. Later on, a higher court says, no, you are wrong. These findings are binding. It means that, in fact, this area had never been tested in Parliament before. Does that make democracy or Parliament a an invalid tool in the hands of South Africans? I think not. I think what we should actually be appreciating is that the fact that the judiciary, the court, can come in South Africa and say, President, you are out of order here. Parliament, you are out of order here, simply means that your democracy is maturing, and one arm of state can actually stand up and say, no, you are wrong in doing this here. You should not have done it that way. So for me, it is a good thing for South Africa in general. Therefore, what Parliament needs to do is to go back to its processes and its systems. Are we capacitated enough? What do we need to do to augment and to ensure that into the future we don't get to where we are? Is it a bad mistake? I believe that any time you fall and you rise, you learn. Thank you, Speaker.
Thanks, Chairperson. I also want to come back to the issue that is raised, and if I may quote the word used, that Parliament violated the Constitution. There's no such statement in the judgment. There's a difference between saying a particular action was inconsistent with the Constitution. It's different from saying you went out knowingly and violated the Constitution. Those are two different things. And in fact, we have a constitutional court precisely to assist our constitutional democracy all the time to be growing. And that's why we welcome the judgment, because it brings better clarity on the basis of which in future we will not make the same mistakes. Because, I mean, even the Cape judgment, the Western Cape judgment initially that had said, no, these are just recommendations. It was not maliciously done because there was hatred for the public protector. It's got nothing to do with the person. It's got nothing to do with the individual occupying the office. At a particular time, there's limited understanding of the issues involved, and everybody proceeds on that basis and the basis of their own interpretation and understanding, and therefore their analysis. Hence, at that point, we proceeded on that basis. However, when the Supreme Court judgment then comes, it brings a different color to the whole matter. But to say Parliament violated, I think, is to take the matter beyond anything that has since been raised so far. And what we are saying is that we welcome this judgment because, one, our constitutional democracy is resilient. That's why we are able, all of us, to listen to that judgment and to accept it and to welcome it and to say, now we have a better basis and a better understanding of what must happen, what must obtain. Will I consider a free vote? It's not a matter of what I consider or what I prefer. It's a matter of the rules and the practice of the House. And it's not, something that's determined in my corner or my own space, or for me to want or not want. It's a matter of this is how we do things, and for as long as we have not yet changed those rules, we will use the rules that we have always used and will proceed accordingly until such time that we, as the collective of South African MPs who are here, can then agree, no, maybe we should change the process and the rules. I think there are some issues, Secretary, that you should pick. Okay, yeah.
The members of Parliament vote individually. The presiding officer has absolutely cannot say to a member, you must vote this way or not that way. Parties may decide to vote on a party line. So I think we need to separate a person sitting there presiding and the vote happening on the floor. Because failure to do that is to, because the question actually suggests that the speaker has anything to do with how the House votes. And I want to marry this question back to the question earlier on that says, and how does this vote reflect what the public says, or something like that. So I want to say that members of parliament can vote against, they can vote for, they can abstain. That has always been the case. I remember when we were passing, years ago, the choice on pregnancy, on termination of pregnancy, that within the ANC benches, there were people who actually voted and others who did not vote, who abstained. Because there was no way you could police how the people are going to vote. So it's not a matter of the presiding officer sitting there and deciding. I think sometimes how party lines go, and sometimes, again, the interpretation of, for instance, presiding officers are accused. The quality of the responses from the executive, why can't you control that? We can't. We don't run the executive. We are not in departments. Therefore, as long as our rules are adhered to, a question is put, a member of the executive is in the House to respond to that question is answered. I'm just trying to say that sometimes the pressure and the prejudice against the presiding officers is something that, honestly, we need to come out and say sometimes it is uncalled for. You also asked us about the public protector's budget. The usual way in which the public protector's office submits their budget, it is considered by the relevant departments, it is allocated, I suspect will be the same way that we will follow. It cannot be that this question arises now, as though because there is a Concord finding, therefore Parliament should go and say, now we must be seen. No, the usual processes will be followed. As far as we know, for years, the public protector has been saying the load on her desk is increasing, and therefore what they get is not always enough. Not necessarily because of this case. So I want to suggest that the usual process will be followed. And the relevant portfolio committee, which oversees, holds the department, the justice, will be seized with the matter of seeing to it that all Chapter 9 institutions are adequately funded, and not to go out and single out the public protector simply because of the Concord court judgment.
On the issue of correctness or incorrectness of advice given, you would recall that the advice given was provided consistent with the court decisions at the time. When the Fifth Parliament started, we were guided by the decision of the Western Cape High Court. And the process of the committee went through just before the decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal. So when the Supreme Court of Appeal decision came, our processes had already ended. All in all, what I'm trying to say is we are guided first and foremost by what the Constitution says, and then secondly, we are guided by whatever piece of legislation that would exist and the rules, and finally, we are guided by the court decisions themselves. And in this instance, we have tracked the decisions of the court from the Western Cape High Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, and the Constitutional Court in this instance. And there's no inclination, I think, from our side to say we will do anything different in that regard. I think the point made, which has been explained by the Speaker and the Chair over and over again, is that when you are dealing with issues of uncertainty, because we're a young democracy, we're having many of the provisions of the Constitution being tested, which is expected and understandable. And in the context of that, the arbiter that provides further clarity on these issues is the Constitutional Court, which then guides everybody accordingly. As we know, in this particular instance, we can have a situation where one court decides one way, therefore providing clarity at that time, and another court takes a different decision, providing a completely different route in terms of how you deal with those matters. And of course, when you have that kind of situation, you then have the Constitutional Court, which then becomes the final arbiter on those matters that require a constitutional engagement and interpretation. So that's how we have followed on these matters. Now, when we look at issues of the judgment, it's important that we have to be mindful that the judgment was not existing at that time. The clarity is coming now, and we have to be mindful of that point. Thank you very much.
There was an issue of whether there would be an apology to the public protector. Now, I don't know who owes the public protector an apology, about what, because as far as Parliament is concerned, the situation is as it has been explained. It has been put forward to everybody to understand where we were coming from and the basis on which we did the things we did, or we followed our procedures, which are not being questioned by the judgment. But the point is, of course, the judgment then brings about a much better clarity on the specific issue relating to the public protector. So I don't think Parliament or the National Assembly specifically, is in a position where our understanding is that we had perhaps done something maliciously for which we have to apologize. No. We now have better clarity. That better clarity is going to illuminate the things we do. It will help us in future when we receive similar reports, when we deal with similar circumstances. And that helps our democracy. And that is why all of the country must actually be happy that there's this better clarity, which, by the way, is not the first time that there are rulings from courts that come our way, that come the direction of the executive, where it is actually ruled this was inconsistent with the law, this was, in fact, the judgment itself quotes some of those cases. So we mustn't deal with this as if there's something new that has happened. It is something that has actually happened before, which we must welcome because it says to South Africa, our constitutional democracy is strong. It is resilient, it is working, it is able to actually dispassionately deal with issues and apportion clarity where it is needed. I think that was the only other issue that we hadn't dealt with.
Is it an indictment on you or on the president or on Parliament that Concord says we violated the Constitution?
No, I thought I had explained that there's no Concord that said we violated. The Concord said certain things were inconsistent with the law, were inconsistent with the constitutional provisions, and were specific about the powers of the public protector, and therefore how from the beginning the issues should have been dealt with. And that, in fact, and which is another good thing that came out of this, we had a right even to question or to differ with the report. But in that instance, what should have been done was not for that position that we might have had of questioning certain areas of what the public protector's report was saying, that we shouldn't have just left it at that, but rather taken it up with the courts. And again, that's something that we welcome, that in fact clarifies what we should have done and what we should do in future. So I think we have exhausted the questions to the extent that they were posed to us and we understood them.
I think everybody agrees, ma'am. We'll take the final round of questions. It's the final round of questions, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you're going to have an understanding in this regard. We have now exhausted the hour that was set aside for the press briefing. We need to allow the presiding officers to go to attend to their other pressing priorities. So in this final round, Lukanya, I'll start with you because you still seem to think that there's an aspect of your question that needs to be addressed. Marianne, you'll be next. Yes, okay, and Wyndham. So that is the final set of hands that I have recognized. Lukanya, do you want to start with your question?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I think maybe you've misunderstood my question. My question is this. So you're the chairperson of the ANC. You're the Speaker of the National Assembly. One of the top 6 members of, top 6 leaders of the ANC. And for 22 years, I mean, the ANC has been the ruling party. For 80 years before that, the ANC was a liberation movement. And then we get to a point where the Constitutional Court says that members of the ANC within the National Assembly, under your supervision, and the President of the ANC had failed to withhold the Constitution, had failed to act in a manner that is consistent with the Constitution, or had failed to do what the Constitution requires of them. My question was, do you feel that that is an indictment on you, on the ANC, and on the President? Thank you, ma'am.
It is just a follow-up for clarification, and it is directed, please, to the Speaker of the National Assembly, as quite correctly the Constitutional Court ruling did deal with the National Assembly only. Did I understand you correctly today that what is being said here is that the National Assembly did nothing wrong except for one little thing, that instead of taking the resolution in the House, before it came to that, it should have gone to court? But apart from that little hiccup, everything that was done here was okay. Thank you.
Percival Young from EN News. Madam Speaker, I just want to check with you. Obviously, on Friday, we also heard from the ANC, and the ANC SG indicated that he will come and visit the parliamentary caucus on Tuesday. Is he coming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is he coming here as on a normal visit? Is he coming here to direct you guys as to how to deal with that motion on Tuesday? Or what exactly is the nature of his visit here to the ANC caucus on Tuesday?
Wyndham Hartley from Business Day again. Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect, those of us who covered the proceedings in 2 ad hoc committees, and those of us who have covered the proceedings of that resolution in the House, and those of us who have covered the interactions between the Public Protector and Parliament's Justice Committee will understand perfectly well the brutal nature of the interactions between the Public Protector and ANC MPs in this House. Do you regret that?
Final question, Gay.
Thanks. I still haven't heard an answer to my question in terms of where public confidence in the institution is going to rest, or where it will come from if the House votes against the impeachment of the President on the grounds that he's violated the Constitution. Are you concerned that there is going to be a backlash on the part of the opposition parties should that vote go against, or go in favour, shall we say, of the President, and we end up having a vote in favour of a President who's found to have acted inconsistently with the Constitution by a Parliament that's also been found to have done the same thing? Are you concerned that there may be a decision on the part of opposition parties to withdraw their participation in Parliament, which would steer us into a constitutional crisis? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officers. That was the final batch of questions. I now invite the Presiding Officers to respond.
Okay. Let me start with Gay's issue. I really think it's unfair to expect us to sit here and anticipate what's likely to happen or not happen on Tuesday, and what if this happens, what if that doesn't happen. I really think we should leave the situation to unfold. We must get to Tuesday. We have agreed to the application for there to be a debate of the motion. I think surely we should welcome the fact that we are not suppressing the debate on the motion. And for the rest, let's allow that to happen, because we do have law in the country, we do have rules in Parliament, we do have a constitutional order in this country, which constitutional order we can also celebrate is very strong. There's the issue of the public protector. I don't believe she ever went to any of the ad hoc committee meetings. She was never part of that. We understand what was reported to have happened in the Justice Portfolio Committee. And I can tell you that I also regret some of what I read in the media happened in terms of the tone of engagement with her. But that's all I can say. Whether honorable members who were involved in that engagement with her are going to say anything, or they are going to change their views on whatever was happening, I can't say. It can't be expected of me to anticipate what's happening in the minds and of the ordinary or other honorable members. The SG, in fact, the officials of the ANC are going to be in town as of tomorrow, because, as was said, there will be a meeting of a number of structures of the ANC, including the political committee in Parliament, which is chaired by the Deputy President of the ANC. There's also going to be a meeting of the usual structures of the ANC that meet on Mondays. You know, your officials do meet, but we thought to make it easier for us, rather than requiring some of us to go to Joburg, let's all be here, because there's this Tuesday that everybody suddenly has to prepare for, which was not on the program before. So the nature of the visit by the officials of the ANC is that they are leaders. They are the elected leaders of the African National Congress, and it's part of their duty to make sure that the leadership that's required at the moment is given, in particular where it is most urgently needed. And therefore, given that there's going to be the caucus on Tuesday, and the SG has announced that he will, like other officials, be in the caucus, we interact as members of the ANC. We always think together, collectively, because that's how an organization that's expected to lead society operates. So that's the nature of the visit of the Secretary General. I don't know what was the second question. The first question comes from Lukai. I don't know what you want, Lukai. Andikwazi ukuthi ufuna ndithini. Ndithini? Ufuna ntoni?
Your opinion, ma'am. Like,
about
whether you think that as the ANC, right? The ANC, some of us, I'm sure a lot of us grew up thinking that the ANC could do no wrong. And for 80 years, the ANC was a liberation movement, and everybody said, trust the ANC, because the ANC always does the right thing. And then 22 years ago, the ANC became the ruling party. And there were certain things that happened within those 22 years that were very good. And there were certain things that the ANC has done that aren't that good. And now we find ourselves in a point in our democracy with the ANC as the ruling party where 400 members of the ANC, or 200 members or so, of the ANC in the National Assembly have been found, and the ANC president, who is also the president of the Republic, they have been found to have acted in a way that is inconsistent with the Constitution. And I want to know from you, ma'am, as Speaker of the National Assembly, as chairperson of the ANC, just what do you think of how the court has, is it an indictment on the ANC? Have we come to a place where the ANC can no longer be expected to do what is right?
Okay, firstly,
thank you, ma'am.
Firstly, when the ANC calls the next press conference, please pose those questions to those who would be there coming to speak on behalf of the ANC. As the Speaker of the National Assembly, and as an MP in the first Parliament, which also acted as, when it sat specifically looking at the Constitution, part of the Constitutional Assembly, I welcome every step of the way the clarity that's always brought about by relevant institutions putting a spotlight on certain issues which at a particular moment will be giving a challenge to all of us collectively. I welcome it when the clarity comes out, and the Constitutional Court has done that. And it itself, and please read the judgment, is saying we don't question what the National Assembly did in terms of the procedures that it followed. Because that was based on what information and advice was there at our disposal. And the precedents up to that point. And by the way, it's not the first time that it is found that maybe there's something that we didn't see correctly. And it is the duty of the Constitutional Court to sit there and spend the necessary hours on behalf of all South Africa and on behalf of this constitutional democracy, knowing that they are not dealing with criminals, they are not dealing with people who went all out to violate the Constitution, but that it is them who must now look at the actions of all of us and say to us, no, this is not how we think you should have done it. You should have done it differently.
I'm going to try, Marian, to respond to something which I think we've been trying to. Our response to the findings is not that we are saying everything we did is correct and therefore there is just a smaller nyana thing. That's not how we interpret it. We are saying that the court actually goes out of its way to say that it was within the rights and duties of the National Assembly to interact with the report of the public protector in the way it did. It goes further. It says it would really have been simple for the report of the public protector to be taken without having been seriously interacted with, without that report having been considered, to just agree with the findings. Now, the relationship of the National Assembly with the Chapter 9 institutions must also then be borne into consideration. they report. So usually when I report somewhere or somebody reports to me, I have the obligation to go through the report, to accept, to amend, and sometimes to reject. That is in the simplest way. And perhaps that understanding might have been behind the reason why the recipients of the reports would exercise this power to interact with the reports. But we are saying that the lesson that we then learned was that the public protector's findings, if the ad hoc committee had come to the conclusion that they did not agree with them, that the correct thing to have done in terms of what the Constitutional Court says is that perhaps our resolution in the National Assembly would have been, we are arriving at a different conclusion, having interacted with all the reports, and therefore we resolved that this matter must be taken to court to be set aside or to be advised further. Because I suspect that is what the Concord actually says. Had the National Assembly come to that conclusion and said, this is what the public protector says, this is what we are finding, therefore we are not agreeing, the two reports, we are not agreeing. The best arbitrator here is court, help us here. That is our understanding. It is not belittling that, but we are saying it is a lesson we have learned out of this. The interpretation cannot be that the court said the National Assembly or any house or any legislature for that matter has no right to use its internal processes, given by the same constitution, by the way, to interact, to question, to query, whatever. They go further. They say that, and I want to quote what the speaker quoted, it would be incorrect to suggest that a mere investigation by the National Assembly into the findings of the public protector is impermissible. So they're not saying our processes were wrong. They're simply saying how you concluded, instead of taking it up to a court to set aside, you then did it yourself. So that is a big lesson. Earlier on, somebody also brought a question. What about that resolution? Is that resolution, usually the house that takes a decision is the only other body that can go against its own resolution. And I think that in the meeting with the leaders of parties, the speaker will be deliberating on what to do with that resolution which was taken, which the court now says was inconsistent with the Constitution. So I think that matter will be addressed in the speaker's meeting with leaders of political parties.
In fact, to add, in the final orders, in the order relating to Parliament, to the National Assembly, the court says, because the resolution was invalid, it is set aside. In other words, it's of no force. We can then ourselves look more into detail, combing through the judgment again, picking up where there are issues that require our follow-through in whatever way, in whatever structures within the institution, and we will take it forward. So it's not just, it's not important. Of course it's important. That's why we say we have called a press conference on a Sunday morning, precisely because it's of enough importance that it requires us to tell you how we have received it and how we understand it and how, in terms of our constitutional role, what this means and how we are going to take it forward. Thank you very much, Luzuko, and thank you very much for your attention and your time, members of the media. Thanks.
Speaker, thank you very much. Chairperson, thank you. Secretary, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, much appreciated. The press conference is adjourned.